The earth smelled of dust and sorrow as the final ropes lowered Chief Okafor's coffin into the ground. The priest's low voice rose and fell in somber prayers, but to Abigail, the sound felt distant, like someone murmuring underwater. Her hand rested instinctively on her rounded stomach, 7 months of life growing beneath her heart, just as the man who shaped her own life was being laid to rest. She didn't expect peace, but she expected dignity. She expected compassion. She expected her husband to at least stand beside her. Instead, Adrian stepped forward, the sun glinting off his polished shoes, as if he were arriving at a conference rather than his father-in-law's funeral. His expression was stiff, rehearsed, unreadable. "Abigail," he said, voice low but cold enough to slice through the humid air. "Sign this." She turned toward him, confusion tightening her chest. "Sign what?" With a kind of detached efficiency, he reached inside his suit jacket and pulled out a crisp brown envelope. He held it out to her, as if handing over a business memo. "The divorce papers. Let's finalize this today." The words landed like stones in her stomach. She stared at him, speechless. "Today?" "Adrian, my father is being buried." Her voice cracked. "And I'm pregnant with your child." "Which is exactly why this needs to be done now." His jaw tightened in a way she'd learned meant he wouldn't be swayed. "I'm done pretending. I need a partner who understands my ambitions, someone who doesn't limit me." A soft scoff tripped from behind him. Abigail's eyes shifted. And there she was. Naomi. Perfect hair, perfect dress, perfectly smug expression. Her hands were folded over her stomach in a gesture meant to mimic pregnancy, one Abigail never believed, but never had reason to question either. Now, with everything unraveling, that gesture made horrible sense. "You're leaving me? For her?" Adrian didn't deny it. He didn't even look ashamed. "Naomi actually understands me. And she's expecting. She needs me." Her breath caught. "So do I." He didn't blink. Not in the same way. The murmurs around them grew louder. Mourners who had respectfully stood at a distance were now staring openly, some pitying, some curious, some delighted to witness a scandal in real time. Adrian's parents stood rigidly beneath a pointless umbrella, faces stiff. His mother wore a faint smile that revealed everything. This wasn't a sudden decision. It was an arranged humiliation, a planned execution. Adrian shoved a pen in her hand. "Sign. Don't make this dramatic." Her throat tightened painfully, but she signed. Not because she agreed, not because she accepted defeat, but because something inside her, something deep and ancestral, told her not to waste energy fighting a man who had already left her long before today. When Adrian walked away with Naomi at his side, their steps synchronized like a victory march. Abigail stood alone at the edge of her father's grave. The wind pressed against her dress, and for the first time, she understood how quickly a life could fall apart. But she also understood something else. Some endings are invitations. Because when they bury the last piece of your old life, they forget your rebirth is coming and it will shake the ground they stand on.
Before we continue, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter of the story. Now let's dive in. The flat felt colder than usual, even though the Lego sun poured through the windows with its usual relentless brightness. Abigail sat on the edge of the couch, the same couch where she and Adrian once spent evenings laughing about baby names, arguing about movies, dreaming about a future that now felt like a lie written in pencil, easily erased. It had been 3 days since the burial. 3 days since her world had shattered in public. 3 days of endless calls, relentless messages, and an ache that clung to her bones. The divorce papers, signed but not yet processed, lay on the coffee table like a threat waiting to pounce. Adrian's lawyer had called twice already that morning, pushing her to sign additional documents to streamline the process. Streamline, as if she were paperwork. Difficult, they called her, because grief apparently made people inconvenient. Her phone vibrated for the 20th time. She ignored it. She'd ignored all of them. Adrian's sister's sharp warnings, his mother's guilt-soaked messages disguised as moral lessons, even the concerned friends who only reached out to gather gossip. You should let him go. You should be mature about this. Maybe this is for the best. Did you see this coming? Everyone was suddenly an expert on her pain. The isolation was suffocating. Some friends vanished as if her heartbreak were contagious. Others lingered only to feed on the drama. Each message made her feel more alone, more abandoned, more disposable. Her father's study became her refuge, the only room that still held the scent of familiarity and safety. The old wooden desk, the shelves filled with accounting books, the faint cologne he used, it all wrapped around her like a comforting embrace. On the 5th day, something changed. She opened the desk drawer looking for a small notebook, but the drawer stuck halfway as if something inside resisted. After tugging harder, it finally gave way, and something slipped out. A cream-colored envelope. Her name written on it in her father's unmistakable handwriting. Her breath caught. Hands trembling, she slit her finger under the seal and unfolded the letter inside. A second object, a small silver key, clinked softly against the wooden desk. The letter began with a sentence that made her chest tighten. My dearest Abigail, if you are reading this, it means life has not been kind to you. Her eyes stung, but she kept reading. Her father spoke of preparation, of anticipating the world's cruelty, of building something quietly, not for himself, but for her. He wrote about a safe deposit box in First Bank of Lagos, box 447. Inside it, he said she would find documents that would change everything. Accounts, investments, properties, 40 years of work, 40 years of secrets, 40 years of loving her in a language most people never understood. She read the letter 3 times. Each word pulsed with possibility. Had her father known this moment would come? Had he sensed the betrayal before she did? She clutched the key, her heartbeat pounding with something unfamiliar. Not hope, not yet, but something close to it. Her father wasn't just protecting her memory of him, he was protecting her future. Because when a quiet man dies, sometimes his silence leaves behind an empire, and Abigail was about to unlock it.
The next morning, Abigail drove through the bustling streets of Akirawai with a silver key resting in her palm like a promise. Her nightgown was hidden under a hastily tied wrapper, her headscarf slightly crooked, but none of that mattered. She wasn't dressing for appearances. She was driving toward answers, toward whatever her father had hidden behind that key. The city was awake and noisy. Vendors setting up shop, Danfo drivers honking impatiently, people weaving between traffic with the practiced agility of survivors. Abigail barely noticed any of it. Her father's words looped through her mind like a protective chant. Trust no one until they've earned it. Use what I've built to rise above them. Patience is your greatest weapon. Her heart pounded as she stepped into First Bank's cool, air-conditioned lobby. Everything inside felt imposing. Marble floors, glossy counters, a faint mix of cleaning agents and expensive perfume worn by the women in sharp suits. The banker in charge of safe deposit boxes escorted her down a quiet hallway lined with private rooms. He slid a logbook toward her. Sign here, please.
She scribbled her name, hands trembling, and followed him into a small, secure chamber where he placed the box before her. "If you need anything, please press the button on the wall," he said politely before stepping out and closing the door. Her breath hitched. She reached for the key. It slid into the lock with a soft click, and when she lifted the lid, her world tilted. Inside were neatly arranged folders, thick, heavy, labeled in careful handwriting, bank statements, property deeds, investment portfolios, share certificates. She pulled out the first document, then the next, and then another. Zeros, more zeros, numbers so large her brain struggled to register them. Her father, the humble accountant who lived modestly, who clipped coupons, who never bought anything unnecessary, had left her a fortune. Not something comfortable, not something manageable. A fortune large enough to shift her entire life. A fortune worth $1 billion. Her hand covered her mouth as tears blurred the pages. She didn't know whether to laugh or collapse. She ran her fingers over the embossed seals, the signatures, the dates stretching back decades. International investments, commercial real estate in Lagos, Abuja, and across the world. Tech companies she recognized, companies now worth unimaginable amounts. Portfolios diversified with surgical precision. Her father hadn't just saved money, he'd built an empire in silence. At the bottom of the box lay another envelope marked emergency only. She opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was another letter. "You are stronger than they know. You just forgot it for a while. Everything I built is yours, untouchable, protected. Use it wisely, use it when the world shows its teeth." Abigail exhaled shakily. The betrayal she endured now felt small, not painless, but insignificant compared to what she held in her hands. She had resources. She had options. She had power. And for the first time since her father died, since Adrian abandoned her at the graveside, she felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Control. She gathered every file carefully, placed them in her bag, and walked out of the bank with a new posture. Her steps were steadier, her chin lifted slightly higher. The weight inside wasn't pain anymore. It was purpose. Because sometimes the world breaks you just to reveal what you were always capable of, and Abigail was about to show Lagos exactly who she really was.
The ride back home was a blur. Abigail parked outside her building and sat still for a moment, both hands gripping the steering wheel as if anchoring herself to reality. The weight of the documents in her bag felt unreal, like a dream that could vanish if she breathed too hard. But it was real. Every page, every signature, every dollar. Her father had hidden a legacy behind a quiet smile, behind tattered shirts and an old Toyota everyone mocked. He had built wealth in silence and protected it with the kind of foresight only a man who understood human nature could possess. And he had protected her, even from beyond the grave. Inside the flat, she spread the folders across the dining table. Pages rustled like whispers from another world. Property deeds for homes she'd never seen. Stocks in companies she barely recognized. A monthly passive income that could sustain several families comfortably. $4.2 million every 30 days. She touched the papers gently, almost reverently. "Papa, why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. She didn't expect an answer, but she felt one anyway. "Because you were surrounded by people who didn't deserve to know your worth." Her phone buzzed again. This time she checked the message. "Adrian, sign the remaining documents. This is getting out of hand." She stared at the message, her lips curling into a humorless smile. Out of hand? No. Now it was finally in her hands.
Before she could overthink it, she reached for the small business card tucked inside one of the folders. A name printed in elegant serif text caught her eye. Barrister Adele Wale Martins, legal consultant, trust specialist. Her father had circled the name and underlined it twice. She dialed the number. "Good afternoon," a deep, steady voice answered after the second ring. "Martins speaking." "Barrister, my name is Abigail Okafor. My father was—" "Chief Okafor?" There was a brief pause, respectful, heavy. "He has instructed me to assist you when the time came." Her chest tightened. He left so much. There's so much I don't understand." "Then let's take it one step at a time," he replied. "He trusted you more than anyone. I trust his judgment." They scheduled a meeting for the next morning. When she arrived at his office, a sleek space high above Lagos Island, the view alone felt like a declaration of power. Barrister Martins, sharp-eyed and calm, greeted her with the warmth of someone who knew her father deeply. He walked her through everything: the trusts, the investments, the legal protections, the prenup Adrian's mother had pushed for, a prenup that now acted as a steel barrier between her inheritance and the people who underestimated her. Adrian had no claim to a single naira. The Okonkwo family had less power than they ever imagined. And Abigail, she had something none of them expected: authority. As Barrister Martins closed a folder, he looked at her thoughtfully. "Your father did not just leave you wealth, Abigail. He left you a strategy." I exhaled slowly. "A strategy for what?" He said simply, "For justice." And the word didn't sound like revenge. It sounded like destiny. Because when you finally realize how powerful you are, the people who tried to break you become the first to feel the shift. And Abigail was just beginning to turn the tide. Over the next week, Abigail lived in her father's study as if it were a war room. Every morning she brewed tea she never finished, pushing it aside once she became lost in the labyrinth of documents spread across the desk. Every evening, she fell asleep there, surrounded by numbers, strategies, and quiet revelations about the man she thought she fully knew. Chief Okafor had not simply accumulated wealth, he'd engineered it. The more she read, the more she understood the genius behind his choices. He invested in sectors most people ignored, nurtured ideas before they became trends, partnered with people who underestimated him and walked away before they discovered his brilliance. Every portfolio was a testament to patience. Every deed was a quiet victory he never boasted about. He built quietly. He built steadily. He built for her. One file stood out more than the rest, a thick folder labeled Justice Protocol. Inside was a detailed plan handwritten by her father and cross-referenced with legal notes from Barrister Martins. It outlined everything she might need if she was ever betrayed, abandoned, or threatened. Every scenario was addressed, every risk assessed, every possible enemy neutralized with precision. She read it twice, then a third time. The document was both chilling and comforting, proof that her father had known exactly what kind of people she might face. Adrian, Naomi, the Okonkwo family, people who smiled while waiting to strike. At the end of the folder was a single line written in her father's elegant script. Quote, "Patience is not silence. It is strategy." End quote. Those words lodged deep in her chest. Later that afternoon, she returned to Barrister Martin's office. Sunlight filled the room, casting long shadows across the polished floor.
He was reviewing a contract when she arrived, but immediately set it aside. "You look like someone who's discovered the truth," he said with a knowing calm. "I have," Abigail replied. "My father, he didn't just save me, he prepared me." Barrister Martins nodded. Chief Okafor believed in anticipating storms, not reacting to them. He understood the world better than most, especially the people in it. She inhaled deeply. "So what comes next?" He leaned back slightly. "You decide. You now have the resources to rebuild your life quietly or to address what was done to you with precision, not emotionally, strategically." She considered his words. Adrian likely believed she was sitting alone somewhere, drowning in heartbreak. Naomi was probably posting photos online, basking in her illusion of victory. The Okonkwo family likely felt triumphant, certain they'd removed a problem from their son's life. They all thought she was defeated. They all thought she was powerless. They were wrong. Abigail closed the Justice Protocol folder and met Barrister Martin's eyes. "I want to move carefully, not to destroy anyone, but to correct the narrative." He smiled slightly. "Just like your father." Her father's lessons, once simple phrases she never fully appreciated, now bloomed in vivid clarity. He knew cruelty could wear expensive suits. He knew betrayal could hide behind practiced smiles. And he knew his daughter would one day need armor. Now she had it, and she intended to use it correctly. Because when a woman stops reacting and starts strategizing, the world doesn't see the shift right away, but they will feel it soon. Transformation didn't happen in a single sweep. It unfolded slowly, like dawn creeping across the horizon. Abigail spent the next several weeks preparing, not for revenge, but for reinvention. She took careful steps, each one deliberate, each one aligned with her father's philosophy. She started with her appearance, not out of vanity, but strategy. She needed the world to see what she was becoming. Her wardrobe changed from simple dresses to tailored pieces that spoke of elegance without shouting wealth. Soft silks, structured blazers, colors that brought out the quiet confidence in her eyes. She wore jewelry sparingly, the way old money did. Tasteful, subtle, meaningful. People noticed. She stepped into spaces she had never been invited to before. Charity galas, corporate seminars, art exhibitions. She was always polite, always composed, always carrying herself like someone who belonged, not because of connections, but because of presence. The first event that made Lagos whisper was a private fundraiser for Lagoon Hospital. She walked in gracefully, 7 months pregnant, dressed in a serene emerald gown that highlighted her natural beauty. Conversations dipped as she entered. Eyes widened. Some recognized her immediately. Others whispered her name with growing curiosity. But the moment that changed everything was when she stepped up to the donation table and quietly pledged $500,000 to support neonatal care. The organizers were stunned. The room went silent for a heartbeat before filling with murmurs that rippled like waves. Her name was announced with formal gratitude, and heads turned so sharply it was nearly audible. Mrs. Okonkwo, Adrian's mother, was there. The look on her face when Abigail's name echoed through the hall could have frozen time. Confusion, shock, fear, a dawning realization that the woman she dismissed as simple had resources she couldn't even comprehend. Abigail didn't acknowledge her. She simply smiled at the applause and returned to her seat. By the next morning, her name appeared in society blogs. Who is Abigail Okafor? Silent heiress stuns Lagos. Is she connected to old wealth? Rumors spiraled, conversations shifted. And while curiosity grew, Adrian began to feel pressure. His colleagues at the firm started treating him differently, asking probing questions he couldn't answer.
He was no longer the ambitious rising star married to a plain woman. Now he was the man who had discarded someone powerful. Meanwhile, Naomi struggled in her own way. She had been flaunting a supposed pregnancy for months, yet her stomach remained suspiciously flat. People noticed, people talked. Her once flawless image began to crumble beneath speculation. Every step Abigail made, every room she entered, every gracious smile she offered, all of it shifted the narrative. She wasn't chasing revenge. She was simply becoming visible. And visibility in Lego society was power. At night, she still returned to her father's study, planning, quietly, patiently. She reread the justice protocol. She studied her investments. She built a new identity, calm, refined, undeniable. She didn't need to expose anyone. Not yet. Her presence alone was unraveling their illusions, because sometimes you don't need to strike first. Just stepping into your true power makes your enemies crumble on their own.
2 months later, the world shifted again, this time in the most intimate, miraculous way. Abigail went into labor just before dawn. The contractions came slowly at first, then all at once, gripping her with a force that stole her breath. She made it to the private maternity wing of a top-tier hospital, escorted by the driver Barrister Martins insisted she hire for safety. The hospital room was quiet, scented with antiseptic and the distant hum of machines. Nurses moved around her with practiced calm, offering reassurance as she breathed through each wave of pain. Hours later, with one final push, a soft cry filled the room. Her son had arrived. 8 pounds, healthy, beautiful. His eyes, when they opened, carried a depth that reminded her instantly of her father. Wise, steady, ancient in a way newborns aren't supposed to be. She named him Simon, meaning God has heard, because in all her suffering, something divine had listened. Holding him against her chest, she felt a kind of peace she hadn't known was possible. His tiny fingers curled around hers, anchoring her to a future far brighter than the past she'd left behind. She didn't tell Adrian she was in labor. She didn't tell anyone from the Okonkwo family. If they cared, they would have checked on her long before this moment. And if they didn't, then they had forfeited any right to share in her joy. News of Simon's birth spread anyway. Bouquets began arriving before she even left the hospital. Expensive arrangements from politicians, philanthropists, CEOs, and socialites who had suddenly discovered deep admiration for the mysterious heiress. Each card carried congratulations mixed with subtle invitations to connect. But one delivery meant more than the others. A sealed envelope from Barrister Martins. Inside was a letter in her father's handwriting, dated 3 years earlier, written long before any betrayal, long before illness touched him. A letter meant explicitly for the day she became a mother. "My dearest Abigail," it began. "If you are reading this, then your greatest joy has arrived." Her breath trembled. "If you are reading this, then your greatest joy has arrived. I wish I could hold my grandchild. I wish I could stand beside you as you take on this new journey. But since I cannot, I want you to remember something. Strength is inherited. Not in wealth, not in property, but in spirit." She blinked away tears, continuing, "The world will test you differently now. It will push you harder because you're a mother. But you were built for challenges. I've prepared everything you need, not just to survive, but to rise. The next phase is yours to choose." The letter ended with a sentence that felt like prophecy. "When you are ready, reveal the truth, not for revenge, but for clarity." Abigail closed the letter slowly. Her father had known. Not the details, not the specifics, but he knew life would corner her one day. And he prepared her escape routes, her armor,
her weapons. The weeks following Simon's birth were transformative. She moved more carefully, more gracefully, but with an underlying confidence now rooted in motherhood. She attended events only when necessary, each appearance calculated to strengthen her public presence. Meanwhile, Adrian's world was beginning to tremble. Rumors about Naomi's fake pregnancy grew louder. His law firm subtly distanced themselves. His parents received fewer invitations from the social circles they once dominated. Their power was thinning, and they still had no idea how much deeper the storm would go. Because when a woman becomes a mother, she doesn't just protect her child, she becomes unstoppable. And Abigail was ready to show the world exactly that.
6 months passed. 6 months of quiet rebuilding, strategic patience, and a steady rise in Abigail's presence across Lagos society. With baby Simon growing stronger each day, her routine settled into a balance of motherhood and meticulous planning. She wasn't rushing anything. Her father had taught her better than that. But now, it was time. The launch of the Chief Okofor Foundation had been in the works for months, guided by a team of advisors and shaped by her father's original notes. It was designed to support women facing abandonment, children in vulnerable conditions, and families crushed by circumstances similar to what she had endured. But the event was more than philanthropy. It was a message. The invitations were printed on thick cream paper with elegant gold lettering. 500 of Lagos's most influential figures received them: business leaders, political elites, socialites, journalists, philanthropists. A collection of power that most people could only dream of gathering in one room. And among those names, by her deliberate choice, Adrian Okonkwo, Mr. and Mrs. Okonkwo, Naomi Bennett. Barrister Martins hesitated when she insisted they be included. "Are you sure about this?" he asked. "You don't owe them visibility." "I don't want to hide," Abigail replied. "I want them to see." He recognized the resolve in her tone and nodded. And so, the names remained. The venue was the grand ballroom of the Oriental Hotel. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, tall draped curtains that shimmered under warm lighting. Florists worked for hours, filling the room with fresh lilies and white roses. The final design radiated elegance, but not excess. Exactly the impression she wanted. On the night of the event, the ballroom filled quickly. Guests took their seats, whispering with curiosity about the young woman who had become a rising mystery in Lagos's elite circles. Some had seen her at events. Some had only heard rumors. None knew the full truth. This night would change that. Abigail arrived precisely on time, wearing a stunning royal blue gown that floated behind her like a wave of quiet authority. She carried Simon in her arms, asleep in a soft blanket, and the sight alone caused heads to turn. Mothers smiled, men straightened, women whispered. People responded instinctively to a woman who exuded both strength and gentleness. And then she saw them. Adrian stood near the bar, looking deeply uncomfortable. He pulled at his collar as if the room were too warm, though it wasn't. His eyes darted nervously, scanning the room for familiar faces, only to find fewer allies than he expected. Naomi stood beside him, wearing a sequin dress that tried too hard. Her posture was stiff, her smile brittle. She kept adjusting the fabric around her waist as if trying to hide the obvious absence of a baby bump she had claimed for months. For the first time, Abigail saw fear flicker across her face. Mr. and Mrs. Okonkwo arrived moments later. Their expressions were carved from arrogance, but even from across the room, Abigail saw cracks forming. Hesitation in their steps, uncertainty in their eyes. Their reputation had taken blows they couldn't publicly acknowledge. She didn't approach them. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough.
Throughout the room, powerful guests approached Abigail, greeting her warmly, complimenting her generosity, praising the foundation she had built in her father's honor. Photographers captured every moment, and with each flash of the camera, one truth became clearer. Abigail was the center of the room. Everyone else revolved around her, especially the people who had once dismissed her. As she handed Simon to the nanny and prepared to take the stage, she felt something settle inside her. Not anger, not revenge, clarity. The kind her father promised would come. Because the moment you step into your true power, the people who betrayed you will finally understand what they lost, and Abigail was ready to let the truth speak for itself.
At exactly 7:30 p.m., the ballroom lights dimmed. Conversations tapered into quiet curiosity as a single spotlight illuminated the stage. Barrister Adewale Martins stepped up to the podium with the calm authority of a man used to commanding silence. "Good evening, distinguished guests," he began, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "We gather tonight to honor the legacy of a remarkable man and to celebrate the official launch of the Chief Okafor Foundation." Polite applause rippled through the audience. "And now," he continued, "it is my honor to invite his daughter, Abigail Okafor, to speak." The applause grew louder, genuine, respectful, anticipatory. Abigail rose from her seat with measured grace. Her gown flowed behind her like a whisper as she walked toward the stage. She didn't rush. She didn't hesitate. Each step was deliberate, poised, steady, echoing the transformation she had embraced over the past months. When she reached the podium, she paused, scanning the faces before her. 500 of the most influential individuals in Lagos sat waiting for her words. Some curious, some impressed, some skeptical. And then there were the four faces she knew best: Adrian, Naomi, Mr. Okonkwo, Mrs. Okonkwo. She did not linger on them, but she didn't avoid them either. She simply acknowledged their presence with a calmness they hadn't expected. She adjusted the microphone slightly. "Thank you for being here," she began, her voice steady, warm, but laced with a particular strength that made the crowd lean forward. "Tonight is about legacy, about honoring a man who taught me everything I know about resilience, dignity, and patience." She took a slow breath. "A year ago, I stood at a cemetery in Ikoyi, burying my father. It was the most painful moment of my life." The room fell silent, not polite silence, attentive silence. "I was 7 months pregnant, heartbroken, alone, and while I was still saying goodbye to the man who raised me, something happened that I will never forget." A ripple of tension passed through the audience. Someone I trusted, someone I promised my life to, handed me divorce papers at my father's graveside. A gasp swept across the ballroom. Abigail did not raise her voice. She did not dramatize. She simply stated the truth, and the truth carried its own thunder. I did not understand the cruelty of that moment until later. I did not understand the betrayal, the manipulation, the deception happening behind the scenes. Not yet. She tapped a button on the podium. A large screen behind her lit up with a photograph of her father smiling gently, the same warmth she carried in her own eyes. "But my father," she continued softly, "understood everything long before I did. He knew human nature, he knew greed, and he knew that someday I would need protection from people who smiled at me while planning my downfall." Whispers spread across the hall like wildfire. "He left me not only resources, but wisdom. He left me instructions, not for revenge, but for clarity, for truth, for justice." She let that sink in. And tonight, The truth begins. Her words were not loud, yet they landed like a drumbeat. Somewhere near the back of the room, Naomi shifted uncomfortably. Adrian looked down at his hands. Mrs. Okonkwo stiffened. Mr. Okonkwo clenched his jaw. Abigail continued, her voice calm but unshakable. My story is not just mine. It is the story of countless women who have been underestimated, dismissed, humiliated, or cast aside when they were most vulnerable. This foundation is for them. Applause rose, not scattered, but unified. She placed a hand on the podium, steady and serene. And now, I will show you exactly why this foundation exists. Because the truth, once spoken at the perfect moment, is not just powerful, it is unstoppable. And Abigail was just beginning to reveal hers.
Abigail pressed another button on the podium, and the screen behind her shifted. The soft image of her father faded, replaced by something sharper. Cold lines of text arranged like a timeline. The hall leaned in collectively, sensing that the night was about to tilt. These, she said calmly, are the messages that began 8 months before my marriage ended. A text conversation appeared on the screen, blurred names for privacy, but the content unmistakable. A woman's message. I can get him to leave her. He's already frustrated with her anyway. A reply. Play your role. He'll fold. The audience erupted with murmurs. Eyes darted toward Adrian and Naomi. Naomi's face drained of color. More messages popped up, screenshots mapping the quiet decay of Abigail's marriage. Behind her, the betrayal scrolled across the screen like a silent confession. Tell him you're pregnant. That will secure everything. She's too soft. She won't fight back. He needs someone like you, not that basic woman. At that last line, the audience gasped. Abigail let the words hang in the air. I was not aware, she continued gently, that my marriage had been negotiated behind my back, or that someone I trusted had been encouraged to discard me like a complication. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. Her voice remained calm, almost clinical. Pain is one thing. Betrayal is another. But deception makes you question your own reality. She turned slightly, allowing the audience to see her profile, serene, steady. And then comes the most heartbreaking part. Another tap. The screen changed again. This time, it showed a message Naomi had sent to a friend dated months before Abigail was handed divorce papers. Large, bold text filled the screen. The pregnancy is fake, but it's perfect leverage. Once he believes it, he won't leave. The ballroom erupted. People stood from their seats, talking over one another. Phones came up, hands flew to mouths. Naomi visibly shook, gripping her purse as if it were a lifeline. Adrian stared at the screen in horror, his entire face collapsing. Mrs. Okonkwo looked as though she'd been slapped. Her husband's shoulders sagged, the weight of shame pressing down like a stone. Abigail waited for the noise to settle. When the room finally calmed, she spoke again, soft, but with a clarity that carried. My husband didn't leave me because of incompatibility, not because he suddenly realized I didn't fit into his world. He left because he believed a lie crafted to trap him, and he used it as justification to humiliate me. Silence now, not a whisper, not a breath. And on the day I buried my father, instead of compassion, I received cruelty. Instead of support, I received abandonment. Instead of honesty, I received manipulation. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. But I want to make something very clear tonight. Her voice grew stronger. This is not about destroying anyone. This is about reclaiming the narrative. This is about showing that truth doesn't need to scream, it just needs to stand in the light. The audience erupted in applause, loud, thunderous, rising like a wave. Abigail met their fervor with calm composure, letting the moment belong not to her pain, but to her strength. "And now," she said softly, "there is one more truth you deserve to know. Because the most powerful reveal is never the first one. It's the one that comes when the room is holding its breath." The ballroom had fallen into a silence so complete it felt fragile, like the slightest sound might shatter it. Abigail stood steady at the podium, the glow of the projector washing over her like a halo. The audience waited, hungry, breathless, unable to look away. She tapped the button again. The screen flickered. This time, a new set of messages appeared. Emails, not texts. Emails between Adrian and his mother. Emails sent late at night, weeks before the funeral, during the months when Abigail still believed she had a functioning marriage. Mrs. Okonkwo's words appeared in bold lettering. "You must leave her. She will weigh you down. Her family is nothing. She brings nothing. Naomi is a better match. Her people have influence. End it quickly. It's for the best. We will support you." Gasps rippled across the hall like small explosions. Adrian's responses followed. "I don't know how to tell her. She's pregnant. It feels wrong. I'll handle it soon. Stop pressuring me." And then the message that slashed through the room. "I'll ask her to sign at the funeral. She'll be too emotional to argue." Outrage swept across the crowd. Someone muttered, "My God." Others shook their heads, murmuring in disbelief. A woman near the front covered her mouth with both hands. Adrian looked like a man who had just watched his own life detonate. Naomi's eyes filled with horror, not guilt, but fear of being associated with such cruelty. Mrs. Okonkwo sat frozen, her lips trembling, her earlier arrogance collapsing into embarrassment. Abigail let the reaction settle. Then, softly, she spoke. "When you are loved by someone, you don't expect them to orchestrate your humiliation. You don't expect their family to treat you like an obstacle. You don't expect to be discarded because someone more convenient appears." Her gaze swept across the audience. "I was not perfect, but I was loyal. I was supportive. I was carrying our child. And yet they believed I didn't matter. They believed I would stay silent forever." She paused. And that, her voice dropped to a measured whisper, was their only mistake. She tapped the button again. A final message appeared on the screen. Short, almost insignificant in size, but catastrophic in meaning. It was from Naomi to a friend. "Once he divorces her, I'll step in. His family will push the rest. Easy win." The hall erupted in judgment. The betrayal was complete, the story undeniable. For the first time, Abigail turned slightly, just enough for the audience to notice her glance toward Adrian's table. Her expression held no anger, no gloating, only clarity. She said, "Some betrayals are not about the action itself, but what they reveal. They reveal who someone truly is. They reveal what people value. And they reveal who never deserved a place in your life to begin with." A beat of silence. Then she added, "And I am grateful, because without their betrayal, I would never have discovered the truth my father left for me." A murmur of realization swept through the hall. Her father's wealth, her father's foresight, her father's justice. Abigail straightened, her voice lifting with quiet power. "I stand here tonight not as a victim of betrayal, but as the daughter of a man who taught me that the greatest advantage in life is being underestimated. The lights in the hall seemed to sharpen, as if even the chandeliers understood the significance of her words. "And now," she said, calmly, "I will show you exactly what they underestimated. Because when the truth finishes speaking, the consequences begin." And Abigail was ready to step into the most powerful moment of her life. The ballroom settled again, though the atmosphere remained charged, electric, trembling, heavy with the weight of everything Abigail had unveiled. Her story had already shaken the room, but everyone sensed she wasn't done. Something bigger, something defining was coming. She pressed the next button. This time, the screen did not display messages. It showed numbers, bank statements, portfolio summaries, property valuations. A billion-dollar empire revealed line by line. A stunned silence fell over the room. Abigail kept her hands lightly placed on the podium. Her voice was gentle, unhurried. "My father," she began, "was known as a modest man. Many believed he lived an ordinary life, that he had little, that he left little." A soft, sad smile touched her lips. "But that was because my father believed true power does not need to announce itself." She gestured toward the glowing screen behind her. "For 40 years, he invested quietly. He built quietly. He protected quietly, and he structured everything so that it would come to me only when I needed it." The guests leaned forward, mesmerized by the revelation. "These are just a few of the assets he placed in my name. Properties across Lagos, Abuja, London, Dubai, stakes in tech companies you've read about in headlines, bonds, trusts, equity, carefully layered, meticulously planned." She paused, letting that sink in. "And all of it," she continued, "was hidden behind a man who wore the same pair of shoes until the soles were worn thin." Laughter, gentle, respectful, rippled through the room. She looked upward briefly, as if speaking to him. "My father understood the world far better than I ever knew. He knew some people would only see value when it could be exploited. He knew they would treat generosity as weakness, and he knew that one day I might find myself surrounded by those who would mistake my kindness for lack of worth." Her gaze shifted toward Adrian and his parents, not sharply, not cruelly, but with a calm acknowledgement that cut deeper than anger. "He planned for them," she simply said. The audience murmured. The truth was undeniable. Chief Okafor had seen what Abigail could not. He had predicted the betrayal long before it occurred and prepared her for a day she never imagined. She clicked to the final slide, a single line from her father's last letter. "When the world tries to break you, stand still. It will reveal its own weakness." A hush fell over the ballroom. "For months," Abigail continued softly, "I carried the weight of heartbreak. I questioned myself. I wondered what I did wrong, but now I understand." She lifted her chin, her eyes steady, resolute. "It was never about me being unworthy. It was about certain people being incapable of recognizing value that isn't loud." The guests nodded, some wiping tears, others nodding with fierce agreement. The story resonated deeply, echoing experiences many women in the room had lived in silence. "And so," she said, "I stand here strengthened, not shattered, empowered, not humiliated, elevated, not diminished." The applause that followed was thunderous, echoing off the walls like a storm breaking open. She waited for it to quiet, then leaned slightly closer to the microphone. "Now that you've seen the truth," she said, her tone unyielding yet warm, "I will show you what I intend to do with the legacy my father entrusted to me. Because wealth reveals character,
but how you use it reveals destiny. And Abigail was ready to unveil hers.
The applause faded, but the energy in the ballroom remained electric, buzzing, alive, charged with anticipation. Abigail's reveal had already shifted the balance of the night, but there was still one final layer she needed to unveil. Not about the past, not about betrayal, but about purpose. She clicked the next slide. This time, the screen displayed a blueprint, large, detailed, elegant. A map of Lagos with several districts highlighted. "This," she began, "is what my father dreamed of building." He called it Project Haven, a network of safe, accessible centers for women and children in crisis. The audience quieted, intrigued. For years, he planned to launch it, but he became sick before he could complete it. And so he left the framework with me, trusting that when the time was right, I would finish it. She stepped slightly away from the podium so the screen behind her dominated the room. "Tonight," Abigail continued, "I am announcing the completion of Project Haven. We are opening 6 centers across Lagos, state-of-the-art facilities providing legal assistance, housing support, medical care, mental health resources, and vocational training for women who have been abandoned, abused, or left with nothing." A soft gasp rippled through the hall. "These centers," she said, "are not funded by donations. They are fully funded by me." She pointed to the figures displayed, an initial investment of 18 billion naira with long-term sustainability secured through her father's trusts and her expanding portfolio. The room broke into applause again, but this time there was something emotional about it. Genuine admiration replaced shock. Respect replaced curiosity. When the applause settled, Abigail continued, "Many people believe wealth is a shield, something to hide behind, something to flaunt." She shook her head gently. "My father believed wealth was a tool, a responsibility, a means of rebuilding what others have tried to break." Her voice softened. "And I have been broken before, but I refused to stay broken." She glanced at the audience, her expression warm but powerful. "And so this foundation, this project, this legacy is not just about helping women. It is about reminding all of us that strength grows in silence, often unnoticed, until it becomes unstoppable." Cameras flashed. Some guests were visibly emotional. Others watched her with newfound respect, an understanding that she was not merely wealthy, not merely brave, but purposeful. Then she added, with gentle emphasis, "And for anyone wondering if this is about revenge, the answer is no." All eyes subtly drifted toward the Okonkwo family. "This is about transformation, mine, and the transformation of women who deserve better than the pain the world has handed them. I refuse to let my suffering be wasted." A single elegant slide appeared, a photograph of baby Simon, smiling. "He is my future, and I want him to grow up in a world where kindness is not mocked, where loyalty is not weakness, and where strength is not measured by how loudly you boast, but by how deeply you rise." The hall fell silent, touched by the sincerity in her words. Abigail returned to the center of the stage, shoulders straight, voice unwavering. "And tonight," she concluded, "marks not only the launch of Project Haven, but the beginning of the life my father always hoped I would build, one rooted in purpose, clarity, and undeniable strength. Because when a woman discovers her purpose, the world no longer defines her. She defines the world." And Abigail's next step would leave no doubt. The atmosphere inside the ballroom had shifted from awe to reverence. Abigail's voice, her story, her purpose, everything had transformed the night into something unforgettable. But she wasn't finished. There was still one final piece left, one final truth that needed to be placed gently but firmly into the hands of the people who once underestimated her. She rested her hands on the podium, her eyes scanning the room with a calm confidence that radiated through every corner of the hall. "There is one more thing I need to say," she began. The audience leaned forward, almost in unison. "When my marriage ended, people whispered that I must have done something wrong, that I was not enough, that I was the reason it failed." She let that sit for a moment, long enough for the sting of society's assumptions to settle in every heart present. "But now you've seen the truth, and with that truth comes clarity." The screen changed again, fading from baby Simon's smile to a document stamped with official seals. It was a copy of Simon's birth certificate. Abigail's voice took on a quiet strength. "This is my son's reality. This is his identity. And I want it to be known, publicly, clearly, that he did not come into this world as a mistake or as a burden or as leverage for anyone." She took a breath, deep, steady. "My son was wanted. He was loved before he was born, by me and by my father." Soft murmurs echoed around the room. The warmth in her voice softened the tension, reminding everyone that beneath her strength was a heart that had endured more than most could fathom. "But I also want something else to be clear," she added, her tone sharpened with purpose. "Simon is not the responsibility of those who abandoned me. He will grow up with everything he needs, not from them, but from me." Her words hit the room like a quiet thunderclap, steady, undeniable. "I do not need child support. I do not need validation. I do not need acknowledgement from people who walked away from him before he even arrived." Her gaze shifted gracefully, without malice, toward Adrian and his parents. "And so tonight, I am making something official." She pressed another button. A legal document appeared on the screen, signed, stamped, executed. A formal statement. "I, Abigail Chidima Okafor, relinquish any and all claims for financial support, inheritance, or obligations from the Okonkwo family on behalf of myself and my son." The room froze. Not a sound, not a breath. Lawyers in the crowd exchanged astonished glances. Socialites whispered behind gloved hands. Some stared openly at the Okonkwo family, whose faces had collapsed into disbelief. Abigail continued, steady and composed. "I am freeing myself and my child from any ties to those who believed we were unworthy. You cannot abandon what you never valued." A wave of quiet admiration spread through the hall. She wasn't punishing them, she was releasing them. And in doing so, she revealed the true depth of her power. "I stand here tonight not because I need anything from the people who broke me, but because I chose to rise without them." Silence again, heavy, respectful. Then the light softened, casting a warm glow over her, almost as if her father's presence filled the room. "And most importantly," she said gently, "I want my son to grow up knowing strength is not inherited through bloodline, but through the choices we make." Her words wrapped around the audience like a warm cloak. Tonight wasn't about vengeance. It wasn't about shame. It wasn't even about the Okonkwos. It was about liberation. Because true power isn't proven by what you take from others, but what you refuse to let control you. And Abigail's final reveal was still moments away. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath, suspended between everything Abigail had revealed and everything she had yet to say. Her presence commanded the stage, not with aggression, not with boasting, but with the calm authority of a woman who had risen on her own terms. She took a final breath, steady and composed. "There is something my father taught me," she began softly. "He said, when people throw you away, don't waste time trying to prove your worth to them. build the kind of life they'll never be allowed to enter a den. Her words carried through the hall like a gentle wave, measured, deliberate, unforgettable. I have spent the last year rebuilding, not to spite anyone, but to rediscover myself, to remember the woman my father raised, to become the mother my son deserves. She clicked to the final slide. A photograph filled the screen. A picture of Abigail holding baby Simon, both smiling, sunlight wrapped around them like a blessing. Underneath it, in bold lettering, was a single sentence. Strength is not loud, it is lived. The crowd seemed to exhale, some moved to tears, some nodding with unspoken admiration. The photo wasn't polished or staged, it was real, it was honest. It was Abigail. She stepped away from the podium, letting the image linger behind her. I want to thank every one of you, not just for coming tonight, but for bearing witness to the truth. This foundation, this mission, this purpose, none of it is fueled by anger. It is fueled by gratitude. Gratitude for growth, gratitude for clarity, gratitude for a future I am building with intention. Her eyes swept across the audience once more. This night is not about reopening old wounds. It is about closing them fully, permanently. The spotlight softened, framing her like a portrait of triumph. And so I close this chapter with peace, not because the past was easy, but because I chose to rise above it. My journey is no longer defined by who hurt me, but by who I am becoming. Her voice grew steadier, carried by purpose. I wish the Okonkwo family nothing but healing. We may never walk the same path again, but I hope they one day understand what true strength looks like. Not in status, not in wealth, not in manipulation, but in integrity. There was no bitterness, no resentment, only freedom. And to every woman listening, she added, her gaze firm yet tender, I want you to remember this. You are allowed to start over. You are allowed to choose yourself. You are allowed to rise from the ashes of what tried to break you, not quietly, not apologetically, but fully. The audience rose to their feet slowly at first, then all at once, in a standing ovation that echoed through the ballroom. The applause washed over her like a wave of validation, but she simply smiled, graceful and composed. As the ovation grew louder, she lifted baby Simon from the waiting nanny and held him close, her voice soft but clear enough to be heard over the applause. This is my beginning. Every camera in the room captured the moment. A mother, a survivor, an heiress, a woman reborn. And with that, Abigail walked off the stage not as someone reclaiming her dignity, but as someone stepping into a destiny crafted with strength, shaped by truth, and sealed with purpose. Because her story wasn't just about overcoming betrayal. It was about awakening. And for Abigail, the real journey was only just beginning.